Have you ever felt the chill of being watched and known in a way that makes every heartbeat betray you? The year was 1944, and Europe was a continent consumed by fire, fear, and the relentless machinery of World War II. But in a shadowed corridor of an Allied intelligence headquarters, a different kind of war was unfolding. One fought not with tanks or artillery, but with the mind. And at the center of it was her. They called her the Shadow Interrogator. A woman whose presence could unravel the strongest soldiers, whose gaze dissected truth from lies with terrifying precision. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. When she entered a room, silence followed like a wave, thick and suffocating. The walls themselves seemed to shrink. Those who had underestimated her, young, cocky Axis officers or collaborators, found themselves paralyzed, their memories dredged up, their fears laid bare, all under her unflinching stare. It was November 1944, and the tide of war was turning in favor of the Allies. Yet intelligence remained crucial. Every piece of information about troop movements, supply lines, or secret installations could shorten the war, save lives, or condemn entire battalions to slaughter, and no one could extract information like she could. Her methods were unconventional. Psychological manipulation, unpredictability, controlled chaos. One moment she would sit silently, tracing a delicate finger along the edge of a dossier. The next, she would speak with chilling calm, planting a seed of doubt in the mind of even the most hardened officer. She had no need for threats or physical force. She weaponized fear, anticipation, and human weakness. In the dimly lit room, an Axis intelligence officer named Klaus had been brought. He was young, arrogant, certain of his loyalty to the Reich. He laughed at first, dismissing the rumors of her. That laughter ended abruptly. She entered, closed the door without a sound, and leaned against the desk, her eyes locking with his. "I know what you did last month," she said softly, almost as if she were sharing a secret. He stiffened. "Every shipment you misreported, every man you betrayed to your superiors, every lie you thought was invisible." He tried to protest, but the words faltered in his throat. She circled him slowly, her presence predatory yet oddly graceful. "Do you know why people fear me, Klaus?" she asked. Her voice was a whisper now, but it carried the weight of inevitability. "Not because I am cruel, because I am patient. I see everything, I remember everything, and I never forget." This was the Shadow Interrogator's genius. She made her victims complicit in their own unraveling. Every blink, every twitch, every hesitation became evidence. She didn't interrogate. She choreographed an internal theater where the prisoner became both actor and accused. By 1944, she had accumulated a reputation that transcended borders. Rumors among Axis troops spoke of a woman who could read your past, anticipate your lies, and break you without touching you. Stories traveled through secret channels. Officers who had been captured, then released, went back insane, claiming she whispered truths that couldn't possibly be known. Allied officers respected her and feared the toll her methods extracted on their own recruits. Her network was subtle but pervasive. She didn't rely solely on physical detention. Agents, double agents, spies, all funneled information through channels she monitored with meticulous attention. Nothing escaped her notice. The smallest inconsistencies in reports, the flicker of hesitation during briefings, even the tremor in a courier's hand carrying documents across the front. Every detail was a thread in a web she wove across the European theater. Klaus, trapped in that room, was starting to sweat. She never raised her voice, never shouted, yet panic clawed at him like a living thing. The Shadow Interrogator understood the human mind better than most understood physics. She knew that fear could be a tool more effective than bullets, and in that instant, Klaus realized there was no escape. A subtle smile curved her lips, almost imperceptible. "You want to protect yourself, don't you? You think there's a line you can cross safely. Let me show you how fragile that line really is." She leaned forward, her voice silk over steel. "Tell me about the shipment you lied about. Every crate, every code, every man involved, and do not forget a single detail." The interrogation stretched for hours, yet it felt timeless. The room became a pressure chamber where truth and deception fought silently. Klaus's mind was a battlefield. The Shadow Interrogator was both general and executioner. This wasn't torture in the traditional sense. There were no chains, no beatings. Instead, she tortured with precision, with shadows, with anticipation, with the slow unraveling of confidence. By the time dawn crept through the blinds, Klaus was a husk of certainty, a man stripped bare by the careful, relentless dominance of a woman who had mastered the art of war through intellect alone. And while one officer fell, her influence spread invisibly across the European theater. Because in World War II, intelligence won battles that artillery couldn't, and she was the weapon that no one could see until it was too late. But even as 1944 pressed forward, the stakes grew higher. Allied intelligence had to break more than soldiers. They had to intercept operations, sabotage supply chains, and decode secrets that could turn the tide of war. Every success of the Shadow Interrogator amplified the Allies' position. The Axis couldn't anticipate her next move. Sometimes she would let a prisoner go, only to feed misinformation back into their ranks, a single whisper that could misdirect thousands. And here's where it gets even more gripping. Her dominance was not just professional, it became psychological warfare on an unprecedented scale. Soldiers feared her more than generals. Rumors spread in the underground networks. She could anticipate betrayals before they happened, spot spies without documents, and manipulate entire chains of command through subtle intimidation. By 1944, she wasn't just interrogating, she was orchestrating outcomes in ways that directly affected the front line. If you're fascinated by stories like this, hit the like button right now. Because the full story of the Shadow Interrogator will change the way you see World War II, and you won't want to miss a second. That winter, one of her most challenging prisoners arrived, a high-ranking officer who had been responsible for operations in France. Unlike Klaus, he was cautious, cunning, trained to withstand pressure, but even he was no match. She studied him silently for hours, noting every micro-expression, every twitch, every subconscious signal. "You believe you can resist," she whispered, almost conversationally, "but resistance is a luxury you cannot afford." The officer tried to maintain composure, but her tactics were surgical. She alternated between gentleness and veiled threats, a rhythm designed to destabilize, confuse, and eventually extract the truth. By the end of the session, he had unwittingly confessed to multiple covert operations, revealing locations of weapon caches and communication lines the Allies had been hunting for months. Even more chilling, she left traces that ensured the Axis doubted themselves. A single suggestion could ripple through the enemy ranks, causing hesitation, miscommunication, and errors on the battlefield. The Shadow Interrogator's work wasn't just about extraction. It was about shaping entire campaigns with fear, misdirection, and the subtle art of dominance. And while 1944 hurtled toward its bloody climax, she had already become a figure of legend, whispered about in barracks, feared in offices, and revered among the Allied intelligence community. She was a paradox, a woman who wielded no army, yet commanded the outcomes of many. She turned psychology into a weapon, dominance into a shield, and fear into information. As winter of 1944 gave way to the cold, bitter early months of 1945, the European theater of World War II was entering a decisive phase. Cities were being bombed into rubble, soldiers were exhausted, and every piece of intelligence could shift the outcome of battles. And while armies clashed on the fields, the Shadow Interrogator's war was being waged in silence, behind locked doors, under dim lamps that illuminated nothing but fear and secrets. Her reputation had grown to a level where she no longer needed introductions. Prisoners whispered her name in fear before being escorted to her chambers, and even seasoned officers trembled when her shadow fell across a corridor. She understood that fear was not an incidental tool, it was her currency, and she spent it wisely. Every whispered word, every pause, every subtle shift in posture was calculated to extract the maximum confession while leaving the opponent doubting themselves entirely. One of her most critical missions came in early March 1945. Allied forces were pressing into Germany, and intelligence suggested that a critical Axis communication hub, responsible for coordinating reinforcements and supplies to the Eastern Front, remained operational. The man responsible for it, a lieutenant colonel known for his ruthlessness and cunning, had been captured during a skirmish. He was brought to her, defiant, cold, and unwilling to speak. She didn't rush him, that was her genius. She let him stew in the silence, pacing the room, feeling the weight of her gaze. "You are thinking," she said softly, almost conversationally, "that silence can protect you, that the walls cannot hear your thoughts. But thoughts are fragile, and fear makes them brittle." The officer sneered, attempting to assert dominance, but she merely tilted her head as if amused by his ignorance. Hours passed, yet the interrogation never lost momentum. She switched tactics effortlessly, sometimes speaking with warmth, other times delivering veiled threats that suggested she knew more than any human could. Each pause, each glance was a calculated strategy, designed to make him question every decision he had ever made. By the second day, the lieutenant colonel was unraveling. He started revealing small, seemingly insignificant details, believing them to be harmless. But each piece of information was a thread, and she began weaving a complete picture of the communication hub's operations. By the third day, she had extracted locations of key transmitters, codes for messages, and even schedules of reinforcement convoys. Information that, when fed to Allied command, directly influenced strategic bombing campaigns and troop movements. Her dominance was not just psychological. She had learned to exploit the human mind's natural tendencies: guilt, fear of shame, paranoia, and pride. Each prisoner became an unwitting architect of their own confession, revealing more than she ever directly asked for. And while many feared her methods were cruel, those within Allied intelligence recognized that her approach saved lives on the battlefield by shortening campaigns, preventing ambushes, and revealing enemy strategies before they could be executed. But the Shadow Interrogator's influence extended beyond individual prisoners. She orchestrated networks of informants and double agents. She fed carefully curated misinformation back to the enemy, creating confusion and hesitation. Entire operations were delayed, diverted, or dismantled because of her subtle manipulations. By the spring of 1945, her work was not just affecting isolated soldiers. It was shaping the course of World War II itself. Her most notorious operation came when Allied forces needed to uncover a hidden facility producing advanced weapons. The Axis officer in charge was highly trained, arrogant, and confident that his network was secure. Yet under her interrogation, layers of deceit began to crumble. She alternated psychological pressure with calculated empathy, allowing him to believe he was subtly controlling the conversation. In reality, every word he spoke, every hesitation, every false confidence became a key to unlock the facility's secrets. By the time she concluded the interrogation, Allied intelligence had pinpointed the facility's exact location. Commandos moved in, neutralizing the threat with minimal casualties. And yet, the lieutenant colonel never realized how thoroughly he had been manipulated. His mind had been a battlefield far before any soldiers had engaged. Even as World War II reached its final months, her work was far from over. Occupied cities were crawling with remnants of enemy cells, collaborators, and spies. The Shadow Interrogator's network became instrumental in identifying and neutralizing these threats, ensuring that as Allied forces advanced, chaos did not follow in their wake. Her methods were controversial. Some argued that the psychological toll on prisoners was extreme, but the results were undeniable. Intelligence gained, lives saved, operations secured. By the summer of 1945, with Germany collapsing and Axis powers on the brink of surrender, the Shadow Interrogator had become a legend in the intelligence community. She had dominated men who prided themselves on their resilience, extracted critical secrets without a single weapon, and shaped outcomes that altered the trajectory of the war. Her story was one of dominance, cunning, and psychological mastery, yet it remained largely untold outside the secret archives of Allied intelligence. Her work also set a precedent for post-war intelligence operations. Techniques she pioneered: psychological profiling, controlled interrogation environments, and the use of fear and dominance as strategic tools influenced agencies in the years that followed. Even decades later, operatives studied her methods, seeking to replicate the unparalleled success she had achieved during World War II. But there was a human cost. Many prisoners, released after the war, were mentally fractured, unable to reconcile the internal battles they had endured under her watch. And yet, historians would later argue that the cost of her methods paled in comparison to the lives saved on the battlefield, the speed at which Axis operations were disrupted, and the advantage gained for Allied forces at critical junctures. In a way, the Shadow Interrogator symbolized a truth about World War II that few discuss. The war was won not only by tanks, planes, and soldiers, but by minds, sharp, strategic, and unyielding. She was a living testament to the fact that human intellect, dominance, and psychological mastery could be as decisive as any military arsenal. As the Allies celebrated victory in 1945, her story remained largely hidden. No statues, no medals in public view, only the quiet acknowledgement from intelligence officers who knew that without her, the war might have lasted longer, cost more lives, and shifted the balance of power in unpredictable ways. She had dominated not with violence, but with control, insight, and an almost supernatural understanding of the human psyche. And now, decades later, her legacy continues to inspire those fascinated by intelligence, strategy, and the untold stories of World War II. The Shadow Interrogator is proof that history is often shaped not just by those on the front lines, but by those operating in the shadows, quietly turning the tide with cunning, dominance, and intellect. If you found this story gripping, suspenseful, and full of the hidden truths of World War II, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more cinematic, untold stories from history. Share this video with anyone who loves thrilling tales of espionage, strategy, and dominance, because stories like these deserve to be heard.